Omniman is a 2,000-year-old viltrumite who has conquered multiple planets, saved thousands of lives on Earth despite the fact that he was supposed to conquer this planet as well, feels complex feelings towards one of his pets, wife, spared his son even though his ilk would have killed that child in a heartbeat, traversed the universe and had an emo moment before getting some supreme and booty and siring a purple child, and is about to join forces with a one-eyed orange alien in order to kill his genocidal colonizer people, and Invincible just wants to be a normal teenager? My brother, are you a superhero or Pinocchio? It took me 6 episodes of season 3 of Invincible to finally figure out why the show started to supremely suck after that incredible season 1 finale. In season 3, episode 6, Mark basically has to deal with the emotional repercussions of he and his father's little tussle in season 1. Scott, aka Powerplex, a man who lost his sister in recent incident, is seeking justice. He wants Mark to pay for the harm he caused all the victims, and when the legal route does not work, he takes matters into his own hands. He infiltrates the GDA and steals these little circle things that amplify his powers. This is because he has electric powers, but they aren't really anything to write home about, and because these amplifiers will make him super powerful. When his attempt at drawing Mark's attention fails, he decides to basically ruin a ceremony meant to commemorate the lives of the dead. This plan is foiled by Eve, everyone's favorite, technically insanely powerful girly pop, who has been relegated to the position of a hapless eye candy because she does not exist to do anything other than escalate Mark's character development. But even that doesn't work out because the writing in the show is truly abysmal. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. He can literally change things at an atomic level. Why doesn't she have a meaningful side plot? Anyway, Eve manages to contain Powerplex, then the Guardians of the Globe show up so that the stretchy Martian can deliver an unfunny one-liner, and then the Powerplex is put into a vehicle so that he can be taken to supervillain jail. He escapes from the vehicle, goes to his truly insane wife, that woman is crazy, and the baby who I feel really sad for, and they cook up a new plan to get Mark's attention. Powerplex pretends to kidnap his wife and baby, and Mark finally shows up. He tries to electrocute Mark to death and obviously fails because Mark is literally indestructible, but fries his wife and baby to death because duh, idiot. Then Powerplex is put in jail for rehabilitation, and Mark tries to console the man who's lost literally everything by saying that he remembers his sister and nephew. That obviously fails to bring about the intended result because literally everything that has happened, whether or not it was actually Mark's fault, has bolstered Powerplex's convictions that Mark should be brought to justice. And then Mark reaches the same conclusion he's reached basically every single episode. Being a superhero seems to be something that has serious drawbacks. Saving some people almost invariably means killing someone else, and he has to contend with the paradox of yada 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 yada. You catch my drift. After his silly girlfriend says she's been looking for him everywhere except the spot they sit at literally all the time, she consoles him and he looks at her lovingly TM. Then we find out that angstrom Levy has been stalking Mark with all the other versions of Mark who all seem just so much more interesting than him. I don't know what they're up to and why that version of Mark has that disgusting mustache. This episode of Invincible finally gave me the verbiage to explain why Invincible just hasn't been hitting the same as it did in that fabulous first season. It wasn't the long waits between the seasons or the very clunky and preachy storytelling, although I'm gonna talk about that later in the video. That sucks as well. It's the fact that Mark is a super uninteresting character. He is fundamentally boring. I stopped enjoying Invincible because the only entertaining character in the show, other than Mark's mom, who is super layered, stopped featuring so centrally in the plot. So, Invincible shouldn't have been about Mark. It should have been about Omni-Man, and I'll explain why. In the very first episode of Invincible, we are introduced to the really cool original version of the Guardians of the Globe as they fight to stop the Mother Twins from breaking into a building. Darkwing saves some lady from being crushed by a big car and is about to be crushed by the same car when Omni-Man comes around, lifts the car off of him, and saves his life. It's clear already that Darkwing seems to have some ill feelings towards Omni-Man, which makes us as the audience go, what's up with that? Then we cut back to the building, and the Guardians of the Globe are busy fighting those blue guys. Then the Immortal throws people up in the air, and Omni-Man plucks these people from the sky. Omni-Man leaves one person behind, and the Immortal tries to save him, but Omni-Man gets to him first. The Immortal seems annoyed that Omni-Man saved someone he was trying to save. There's that second, what's up with that, from the viewers. And then we're taken to a different scene. Mark Grayson, the 17-year-old titular character, reading a comic book while sitting on the toilet. Omniman comes home and is being gooey with his wife, Debbie. We learn that Mark doesn't have his powers yet and that he and his dad seem to be disappointed about this. At school, Mark tries to save Amber, his future ex girlfriend, who should never have been his girlfriend to begin with, in my opinion, from some creep because he can't sit back and watch this. He gets punched and then Amber kicks the creep in the nuts. Later that day, Mark finds out that he has superpowers when he tries to throw a refuse bag in the dustbin and it goes flying high in the sky. When his dad finds out that he has superpowers, he doesn't seem particularly happy. Again, what's up with that? Mark learns how to fly and is very excited. He takes some more flying lessons with his dad, whereafter his father asks him to punch him. Mark is terrible at it, right? Then Omni-Man punches Mark in the chest and knocks the literal air out of him. Mark complains about being hurt, and Omni-Man tells him that he needs to get used to being hurt if he wants to do what he does. When they get back home, Omni-Man explains that the fact that Mark has superpowers changes things, and he says that I can't help but think that maybe our lives would have been better if maybe he hadn't gotten them at all. The episode ends with Omni-Man killing every member of the Guardians of the Globe in such a gloriously evil sequence. It was so beautifully animated, encapsulating the shock and horror that each hero felt before reaching their end. And after killing every person, Omni-Man looks almost remorseful. The look is so subtle that I didn't even notice it on my first watch. I find out that Omni-Man has killed basically every single colonizing alien group that has tried to take over the Earth because Earth is not theirs to take. He's motivated by conquest, by years and years of conditioning that has taught him to take and take more and more for the sake of empire. He has done unimaginable evil and good, which definitely does not outweigh the sheer weight of all the bad that he has done. And he feels no regret, except for that brief look after he killed the people he fought alongside. There's so much we can do and say about this. Imagine assuming beginning with Omni-Man's upbringing in Viltrum, fighting his way to the top, killing his weaker kin, until finally he's ready to colonize the entire planet. We could have seen him lose his childhood innocence, become hardened as he rises through the ranks. We could have seen how he convinced some to yield and decimated populations who refused to accept their new overlords, how he must have felt after his first single-handed genocide. Maybe show his first few romances, his first few heartbreaks, his first child if he had ones other than Mark and that purple kid, which he definitely does, until finally he gets to Earth and meets Debbie. He feels his feelings for this pet, has a child with her, and then he starts to believe that his son will never get powers. He, oddly, feels comforted by this thought. If his son has no powers, he can live a full life with his wife and son, and then wait until they die before conquering planet Earth. But then suddenly, his son gets his powers and he has to fulfill his mission. Maybe it isn't even because he wants to anymore. Maybe it's because he fears that if he doesn't do this, his son will do it for him. Then, in so doing, Mark would also doom him to execution by the viltrumites. Maybe the comfort of believing that Mark would never get powers caused Omni-Man to feel more deeply than he allowed himself to do in the past. Not in spite of, but because it was fleeting. And then he'd beat his son's butt and stop shy of killing him when he found out that he actually did have powers, then he runs away. We could have traversed the universe with Omniman, depressed and confused, aware that he was going against the will of the Empire, but unwilling to go back and finish the job of killing his son. We could have been with him as he actually, legitimately helped certain planets and fell in love with an ant, despite the fact that, as we will later learn, he missed his wife. But instead, we get some stupid moaning from an American teen who wants so desperately to be special but is chained by his mediocrity. He has no real struggles, past or present. He had a pretty charmed upbringing, and even though Powerplex is kind of insane, he really does not have to face any material consequences for his actions in the present. The central conflict with which Mark must contend, wanting to be good, although this is inevitably tinged with bad, would have probably cut it a decade ago. But in a world where legitimately groundbreaking superhero shows exist, it feels so flat and unimaginative. In the first episode of the show, Mark says that he's nothing like his dad. He says that he's more like his mother, nothing special, and nothing could have been truer. As a matter of fact, whenever Mark interacts with the show's secondary characters, one can't help but notice how outstandingly bland and unremarkable he really is. Let's look at Mark's interaction with those green aliens, the Flaxons, which coincide with his introduction to Teen Team. Teen Team is a team of, you guessed it, teenage heroes. They are the struggling to fight the aliens off as they are better than them in every single way. The Flaxons eventually leave because they're busy dying, because the planet from which they come moves at a faster time than Earth. Mark, meanwhile, picks up an old lady and takes her to the hospital, having failed to do anything useful. It isn't the fact that he couldn't fight off the alien that is the central issue. It's the fact that this incapacity is the same as that of other superheroes. Teen Team amplifies Mark's lack of remarkability. This is because they're able to do the things that he can do and also fail to measure up where he fails to measure up. Over time, he does become much more powerful than them, but even this development is not interesting. Of course, he's more powerful than them. He's the product of years of man-made selection that ensures that the strongest viltrumites survive. Him being strong is not special. Mark's only real competition is Omni-Man, and he moved him. He almost parile. Every other villain Mark has fought since then has either been significantly weaker than him, or he did not actually beat them. They just disappear, want to die, or are bested by some force outside of him. In a way, Mark's defeat of even Conquest is also kind of unremarkable because Conquest explicitly states that he is lonely because none of the Outer Viltrumites actually want to interact with him because they are so scared of him because he's so bloodthirsty. This kind of shows us that to a certain extent, even Conquest wants to die as well. So, hot take, but this whole video is a hot take, so whatever. An example of one such villain is Titan. Technically speaking, Mark is way stronger than Titan, but Titan is more cunning, more intelligent, and more ideologically sound than Mark, and manages to best him at every turn, rendering his strength, at least against him, useless. Mark's I use the words that I can't say. Mark's naivete, lack of knowledge of the world and the way it operates, is emphasized and exploited by Titan. Titan also serves to highlight how empty Mark's ideals really are. Titan wants to improve his city for the benefit of the most downtrodden, and as we find out in season 3, he actually managed to do that. Mark wants to save the world from viltrumites, and other than doing a few intense exercises, has made no real strides in making this actually happen. He was also moved by a different viltrumite in season 2. Him aging does very little to expand his knowledge of this world that he so desperately, allegedly, wishes to save. When Mark is unintentionally bested by Titan back in season 1, we get it. He only just turned 18 and he has a very idealistic view of life. Titan hits Mark at every point he knows will stick, pointing out that Titan lives in a poor, primarily black and brown neighborhood, and that Mark does not relate to these struggles, nor does he view them as part of a bigger picture, because he's a rich kid from a suburb, privileged in basically every material way. He wants to prove that he cares about everyone, and Titan takes advantage of that. But in season 3, Mark essentially falls for the same trick, which shows us that he has had minimal growth as a character. Titan uses Mark in order to get rid of Mr. Liu and secure his spot in the community. Yes, Titan's leadership has improved the state of the community, making it safer for all. That's not what I find issue with. What I'm trying to show is that the reintroduction of Titan, who has fulfilled his ideals and manages to protect them, alongside a floundering Mark, only serves to show how little he has managed to do since Omniman left. It shows us how empty of a character he is. When in reference to Eve, William says,
"Why are you so intimidated by her? Other than she's amazing and you're kind of basic."
He was pretty right on the nose. Throughout this show, Eve's superpowers are literally an afterthought or are suppressed. Her capabilities are understated so as to make Mark appear more capable or at least unique in his capacity, but Eve can literally change matter at a molecular level. Why isn't this a big deal? Correct me if I'm wrong, and I know I'm not, but everything that exists is made of atoms. Atoms are the composite part of literally all matter. So if she wanted to do, Eve could literally change a human being into a chicken. Does nobody understand the gravity of this power? Another thing that annoys me is how the show picked up and then discarded her quest to solve the world problem on a really silly basis because she made one mistake. She was on about ending famines and the like, and the show just made her stop doing that and go study architecture. Why do you need to study architecture when you can be the architect in real life? Does she have to learn how to sew in order to make a shirt materialize in thin air? No. So why would she have to pause her work in order to go to school instead of just doing the work? Oh, I'll tell you why. It's to fabricate personhood, identity for Mark. In season 3, Mark quits the GDA and doesn't know what to do with himself after that. He and Eve decide to open up a business so that they can be super contractors at a prison. Because the show is hell-bent on making a hero whose powers are comparable to that of a god, nothing more than
Gender stereotype.
this business endeavor serves the exclusive purpose of spotlighting and overemphasizing Mark's strength and intrigue. He saves Eve's life over and over again and gets to stop the bad guys from escaping from prison, making him seem bigger than himself, making him appear more important than what he actually is. If, when brainstorming, had thought of making a business where she built up, this would have made Mark less useful and further highlighted how empty of a character he is. So, although the show didn't intend to do this, reducing Eve to just a gender stereotype reveals how boring Mark is in and of himself. Other characters must be made less in order for him to appear like he's more. I'm not going to mince my words. Some of Invincible's writing is pretty shitty. Sometimes it's subtle, and other times it is painstakingly obvious. I feel like people spend a lot of time critiquing the show's animation, and it is quite shoddy at times, but I feel like the writing is significantly worse. Take this clip as an example.
He didn't come home last night. Mom, stop worrying. He probably got buried under a mountain again or something. Well, it wouldn't be the first time.
If someone says again, that obviously means something has happened before. So this is obviously terrible writing. Now let's look at subtle, terrible writing.
How did that new kid do?
Invincible? He has promise, but he seems unprepared for the more realistic aspects of superhero.
Ever heard of subtext? In general, Invincible's most annoying writing is their propensity to tell instead of show. There is so much expository dialogue and so little, hey, look here, make conclusions based on what you can see. Because I'm sometimes kind, I'll start off by giving an example of the show doing a good job of showing. In season 1, episode 1, Mark and Omniman are playing with a ball. One person throws this ball across the wall and then the other person on the other side catches it. On my first watch, I was like, don't they realize that they must have killed someone with a ball somewhere in the world? And after watching every episode since then, I know that one of them definitely knew. When they were playing catch across the world or whatever, Omni-Man knew that he must have killed someone, destroyed some building, or broken some historic site. Mark didn't. He wasn't thinking about the consequences of this game. This activity shows how little Omni-Man cares about human life and spotlights Mark's naivete. This word, I don't know why I keep writing it when I can't pronounce it properly. Whatever. The show makes no real judgment of either state of being. It just clues the audience up on the dynamic and does so very cleverly. Now let's point out one of the instances of telling. Season 3, episode 4. People seem to love this episode, but this is probably my least favorite episode in season 3 so far. Some people from the future come to Mark and ask him for help to get rid of the tyrannical king. Mark says he does not want to help because he wants to focus on his date with Eve, and then the future people kidnap him. He finds out that the Immortal is the Tyrant King, who future Mark left in that position although he did not want it. Immortal asks him to kill him and Mark refuses, and the Immortal goes on a whole soliloquy where he alludes to a bunch of future lore, and it's really, really annoying. The problem with the show's insistence on telling is that it emphasizes how much of a blank slate Mark is personality-wise. Omni-Man also seems to have the personality of a stale piece of bread, but the difference between him and Mark is the fact that Omni-Man has a story, unexplored depths that make him a character with depth. So when the show does expository dialogue in relation to Omni-Man, it still captures our attention because his backstory is interesting. It still has intrigue, drama, and dynamism. The expository dialogue for Mark is boring because he has no backstory. He actually doesn't even have expository dialogue about him. It's dialogue about surrounding characters, which makes him all the more shallow. Also, I just want to complain about another thing that happened in this episode. The show does a stupid fucking third-person POV where they shift from Mark to Omni-Man so that the former can have trauma fixing sex. They do a whole clip of what happened to Alan before he was taken to prison alongside Omni-Man, as if we haven't watched the previous episodes, and it adds nothing to the plot. It is literally only done in order to increase the episode's runtime, which is very annoying and very tacky. Cease. A better woman than me would have started this video by saying that I have not and will never read the comic books or watch videos of the creators explaining why they made certain decisions and not others. I didn't do this because I'm tired of people extraneously improving media that fail to deliver a particular message on its own. I shouldn't have to read the comics or watch interviews to love Mark as the character within the show. He should be compelling enough as a main character to the point where my video is moot. He isn't though. And the worst part is that Mark could have been interesting. He could have been witty. We could have honed in on his obsession with that comic book some more, make him an artist, make him a dweeb who recites lines from the book at random times. Do something. That's literally the only unique thing I know about him, so I don't know what this show could have done more intentionally to make Mark a compelling character. So I'll leave it at that. Point is, the age of the suave, well-built nerd who barely engages in nerdy activity and is supposed to serve as a vector for ordinary white boys to feel special is over. Obviously, Invincible is a good show, but it would have been so much more interesting if Omni-Man was the lead. That said, I'm gonna keep watching it because I've made it this far and I want to see where all of this is going. Speaking of which, look at you. You've made it this far in the video. Thank you.